Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Neil Harvey, former chairman of the States of Alderney Policy and Finance Committee, and now an important member of the Alderney Bird Observatory. Neil is going to give us his views on the recent performance of the States of Alderney and others. Morning, how are you?
Morning, Tony. Yes, yes. Not much of a job to do there then, really.
Well,
If
there we are.
we should cover
Bet
that in 5 minutes.
Yeah, better make it clear that we've recorded this one on Monday, the 26th of August, just in case things change between now and Friday. But there we are.
So,
Let's start off with governance reform. What a letdown. I mean, I really thought that they were going to get this underway, and four of them decide to vote against it. Why?
well, you're asking the wrong person there, but I have to say, next month it will be 20 years since I moved to Alderney, and I thought this was the first hopeful sign of some common sense being applied because whatever the original idea between having a two-yearly election was, and I think it was probably in a day when there was less civil service than there are now, and the theory was it would give continuity. Well, of course, now with the changing world, it's doing exactly the reverse. It means that every 2 years you effectively get a new states with new states members who will take anywhere between 6 to 12 months to understand just what's going on and which levers there are, and they're not very big levers that they can pull on. So you effectively get in between 12 and 18 months of a stable states, relatively stable states. Well, given the timescales to get anything done here with the limited resources, financial and manpower, and the reliance on Guernsey for so much of what we do, it's a ridiculously short period. And, whatever we may feel about individual states members, it does give them an uphill task to carry out any medium term, never mind long term plans. So I
But
was so disappointed when I heard about this.
and three out of four were, people that had been around for a long time, and I understand that they had said at the Policy and Finance Committee meeting immediately prior to the states meeting that they would support it.
Indeed. Yes, I mean, I was surprised that one of the states members, who was certainly one of the brighter ones, was perhaps not aware that changes in the constitution require a higher majority than just a simple majority. But yeah, I gather the president made that clear to them at the states meeting. Yes, I'm told that two people had voted against in PNF, but they still had the sufficient majority to carry it. And then two others, and of course, eventually, when we get Hansard, we will know. Although word on the street has it very clearly who the two were who changed their minds between PNF and the states meeting. Um, I'm told that one of them may perhaps not have totally understood what the implications were, and the other one made no comment, did not make any speech in the States, but just changed his vote to against the proposal. And I just think that is so disappointing and shows a degree of irresponsibility, personal interest, who knows what, that is absolutely disgraceful in states members.
Bit of a
It's
condemnation, Neil, if somebody says they didn't understand the proposition. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, wasn't it?
One would have thought so, but it's not the first time during my time on the States, I've come across a situation where somebody, quite frankly, got confused as to which way they were voting,
Mm.
which suggests they're not really following the action. But there we are. So yes, it's a significant problem. It occurred to me, and please don't take this in any way that I intend to do it, but should I be stupid enough to stand for the states again, which I'm not going to, I would give an irrevocable undertaking for what worth
Yeah,
that I would only stand for 2 years, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
would maybe restand or whatever.
Force
But
the
of course,
situation. Yeah,
well, it might a bit. I mean, it doesn't change the law. The law clearly says
yeah.
that the elections will be for a 4 year term. So even somebody voluntarily sacrificing themselves, if you like, after 2 years doesn't change the law. But I really, honestly can't see any way that this can be resolved for several years now.
No.
And it's such a great shame.
And in my view, it's proof that consensus government just doesn't work.
Well, consensus government works if you have people who understand what they're doing and the implications of what they're doing. And unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
As I say, the reasons why those people voted against are something you might like to explore in due course, because only they can really answer
But
why
they
they.
won't. They won't come on. They won't come on.
Ah, well, there you
I've
go.
tried.
You've tried, yes.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
doesn't that speak volumes? But there we are.
I guess it does really, doesn't it? Let's move on to the code of conduct and disciplinary function.
Mm,
See, there have been two recently, haven't there? There's another one for being
indeed.
getting a bit ratty with one of his fellow members. It's
Yes,
just
and I
sorry.
mean, clearly, I can't speak about the individual cases.
No.
Um, what I will say is that I know all of the people who were on those particular panels, and they are all intelligent people. Um, I have heard the view expressed that with the charm campaign that the chief clerk is now conducting to try and persuade people to stand for the states, some people may have thought it inadvisable to wash the dirty linen in public. I would take exactly the opposite view.
Mm,
I would think that anybody looking at the potential riders and runners for the next election would want reassurance that there are some proper and strong controls over their behaviour in public office. Um, and I will stand to be corrected, but I don't believe the code of conduct panels, and of course they are different people here, different cases, have ever applied anything other than a slap on the wrist. Now, that strikes me as being very, very strange. Um, it may not be that there's a problem with the code, which has been reviewed and revised quite a number of times over the years, but there may be some misconception or wrong perception because, um, without going into any individual cases, there obviously have been cases where there's pretty clear evidence on the face of it, and we're not privy to the discussions of the panel, but there seems to have been some very clear misdemeanors which require more than just a tap on the wrist, and yet for whatever reason, never have they been applied. Short-term suspension would be the next level up, I guess, but I don't think it's ever been applied, and I think therefore, there has to be some question mark, and I know there's been a suggestion that we should join in a Pan Island review to sit mechanism. It might work better, but I am disappointed that not we're looking for somebody to be hung just for the sake of it to encourage the others, as they say, but given the time the code of conduct has been in place, one would have expected that somebody by now would have suffered some appropriate, obviously, penalty, but just doesn't seem to happen. So whether there's instructions from the president, I mean, the president obviously is the first port of call for a complaint, doesn't decide them, doesn't sit on the panel. If he feels it's justified, appoints a panel from the number of people who are available for that, and then it's really left to them what they will do. I was under the misapprehension that the penalties were referred back to the states, but that is not in the current code of conduct. So it is really down to the panel to determine whether an offence has been committed, and if so, what the appropriate punishment is. And I think they need to stiffen their resolve a bit.
yeah, I mean, without naming names, one of the complaints was pretty serious in actual fact, and
Agreed, sir.
I'm amazed that they've come out with a caution. It's just meaningless, isn't it? And as you rightly say, it gives no future candidates any confidence in standing for an organisation where this sort of thing goes on.
Yeah, I think I say if that was a perception by certain people that we shouldn't be airing this issue just when we're trying to persuade people to stand for the states, then I think they've skewed their thinking there. I think they've got it all wrong.
They're obviously very concerned with prospects for the election coming up because presumably if it all goes wrong this time round, the Ministry of Justice will roll up with a commissioner or two and run the place for a few years. In many ways, I don't think that's a bad idea to reset the whole thing.
I quite agree with you, Tony. I think it needs an outside influence, somebody with the appropriate experience and knowledge to look at the situation. I know one or two people, including some of your previous celebrities on this program, have talked about a commissioner. But whether the UK, the Ministry of Justice, A, would support the cost, or B, the trouble of opening this particular can of worms called Alderney, I remain to be convinced. Yes, you're quite right. I mean, I was looking back through these constitutional issues, and although I can't lay my hands on it now because my backlog of papers is mostly piled up with marina projects, the Home Office in 1995 did an excellent review of the then states, which, quite frankly, with a chief clerk and hardly anybody else, the states members were making day-to-day decisions on, where the cattle should go and things like that. And I think they had something in excess of 23, 24 committees. And the Home Office report was pretty, pretty strident on that sort of thing, and a lot of their recommendations were implemented. But I think it needed that outside influence from a respected body, as the Home Office used to be. It needed that outside influence to actually make a change here. This whole thing about turkeys voting for Christmas, well, it's a bit of a cliche. Not too keen on cliches, but there is an element of truth in it. And if the turnout, or the number of candidates for the November elections was significantly below the number of seats available, then I really think that some action does need to be taken. I would hesitate to say Guernsey should get involved because their track record is not exactly wonderful. But if the Ministry of Justice could find a suitable person and was prepared to send somebody to really sort of delve deep into the situation in Alderney and come up with some good recommendations, I would think that would be a good thing. I mean, another reason given for the failure to change the electoral cycle, given, I believe, was that, well, we're having trouble finding 5 candidates. What's it going to be like if we have to find 10? Well, I guess one simple answer to that is reduce the number you need. But again, that requires a change in the law, and people who think they might like to go on the stage but probably never will, objecting to a reduction in the potential field.
But that was going to be the next step, wasn't it? Get
Well,
the
it was
electoral cycle
logically,
lined up and then reduce from 10
absolutely.
to 8.
Yeah,
That had all been looked at.
yeah, the electoral cycle was such an obvious hurdle to knock over.
Mm,
Really is why it's so disappointing, not just in itself, but in what it says about the state's willingness to reform itself, if you
yeah,
like.
yeah,
But I think a reduction. I mean, we had this debate many, many years ago. Now, I was in the States, as should we go down to 8 or 6 or 5? And of course, it instantly begs the question. Well, that's okay. You could go down to 5 as long as it was, inverted commas, the right 5. And I think that is one of the one of the issues facing us this November. I'm told there are several potentially good candidates who are prepared to stand, and I wish them all the best if that is the case. I know of one or two who I really would prefer not to see on the states, who could well get in by default if there are
yeah,
insufficient candidates.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and that is, to my mind, it's a greater danger getting the wrong states members than getting a shortage of states members.
Mm.
And if it really fell short, then yes, I guess some exterior force majeure, the Ministry of Justice or whatever, might have to take a role because we'd be in breach of the law of government in Alderney.
Yeah, yeah, I can see
Watch
that.
this space. November's going to be an interesting time, both sides of the Atlantic.
Let's let's uh remember when we spoke earlier this year, we were talking about the big year for Alderney. Do you remember?
Mm,
And it was going to
yeah.
affect the environment, the economy, energy, care, housing, education, transport. Any of those boxes ticked at this stage?
Difficult to see any that you could say have been ticked. As the economy limps along, the environment, nobody has done too much damage to the environment, so I guess that's
That's a
not a
plus.
tick, at least, no change. Energy, well, we wait to hear what's going to happen on energy. I mean, obviously, there's the plan for the solar farm on the middle of the island. Um, Everything just seems to take so long, doesn't it?
Yeah, getting
But
nowhere.
care, well, there's the Connaught extension still not filled. I believe that staffing levels were um, managed by the people at the Connaught in anticipation of the extension opening and the people who are needing of care being taken in there. But
Yeah.
of course, for whatever reason, and I'm as unclear as probably most of the rest of Alderney as to why it's not being finished. Housing, I'm continually getting people saying to me, when is something going to be done with the old Connaught building,
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. Um, Education is something that I probably skipped through when I was in my teens, and I'm still not totally to grips with education even now. Um, but I think the results from the school looked encouraging. And transport, well, what can you say about transport, really? I'm sure you'll be coming to that later, Tony.
I think it's, on the list, isn't it?
So let's save our fire or ire for that, shall we?
Would you agree that the civil service has become bloated? I see they're now advertising for a finance officer at a maximum salary of £44,000 a year. Why do they need that?
Well, again, I have no idea, and whenever I try and find out how many civil servants there are, and I have to say I've not been sort of too determined in my inquiries, it's rather difficult to get a fix on. There certainly seem to be quite a few more jobs. What they're all doing, I don't know. Maybe some bold politician would say, let's have an audit, a public audit of the roles, not the individuals, but of the roles in the civil service.
Yeah,
So we can, we could get a feel for what job titles there are, how many people there are, and what they're all doing, because there do seem to be rather more with clever titles and what have you. But equally, though, I haven't met the chief clerk. People on the inside tell me he's a very strong, determined character. So, and he's still relatively new in the job. So let's hope he's able to make some progress with the civil servants. Many of them, of course, do a very good job, but they take their lead from the people at the top, and for better or for worse. And let's hope it's for better. Obviously, I always have, being a retired banker, have sympathy for jobs in the finance sector, and I'm guessing that it is necessary. But I don't think it's any good looking at individual jobs. Rather, we should be looking at the whole structure
yeah,
of the civil
yeah,
service. And I think
yeah.
it would be quite helpful to people to have a structure chart, which might just, also indicate broad responsibilities and how many people are employed in each department, each part of the thing.
I mean, looking at this one, Neil, you've got a situation where the Treasury Department essentially is run by Guernsey civil servants, not Alderney civil servants. And so presumably Guernsey pays some of their salaries, or does it all come from the
I think
Alderney
probably Guernsey
pot?
do pay some, but of course there is still an accounting function and a
Hmm,
treasury function here, even though the big decisions are made by Guernsey, and Guernsey still, I believe, has quite a sort of tight grip on any expenditure that we might undertake here. So,
yeah.
I think there is a very real treasury function here. Obviously, you could then beg the question, well, how necessary is it to have such a treasury function here on the spot? But again, jumping ahead to one of your later questions, I assume that the income tax department in Guernsey is part of the treasury function there. And when you call it a function, there's probably a sort of,
Yeah.
it's the
No,
nonsense, isn't it? Because
no.
it just doesn't function.
Were you surprised about the airport and the runway? I
Not
wasn't.
not in the slightest.
No.
And I'm told there are one or two states members who are clinging, I have to say, rather forlornly to the hope that something yet may be salvaged from the extended all singing, all dancing runway, new terminal, ATRs, etc., etc., might still be brought about. It's not going to be brought about with finance from Guernsey.
No.
I can't imagine any external financier would look at the proposition for very long and say, this is something I really want to do. So I think it's high time to face facts. And I know there are people, maybe not on the states themselves, who are trying to come up with some solutions. Um, and I think it's so much has been said, and so there is so much negativity around at the moment about the whole issue of the air links that I suspect You know, Guernsey will probably pretty soon have us just where they want us, which is that we will get some sort of minimal air service probably to Guernsey.
Yeah.
Um, I dread the thought of the Southampton route going because I think it would be appalling for our economy. Um, yeah, and I've talked to somebody who is a supporter of the idea of a shuttle service to Guernsey, and maybe improve security here so that people could be through ticketed from Southampton to Alderney via Guernsey. Um, but I think our experience has shown on things like tourism, for example, and I believe it's not dissimilar on the side lack of avgas at the airport. There are those in Guernsey who would far rather do the business themselves than see it go to Alderney.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking of a holiday in the Channel Islands, and Alderney might appear on your radar, and you realise that you actually have to fly to Guernsey first. How many people will say, "Well, let's see what Guernsey has to offer first"? So I think the loss of Southampton would be very sad, but I suspect they've reduced our expectations of future transport air links by so much that we will almost be glad to have something left at the end of the day. I think it's a great shame. I
Inevitably, this brings us on to Aurigny, and the losses this year with all this wet leasing must be horrendous. Um, is the CEO still tenable? He's never available for
well,
interviews.
again, I've never met him. I don't know many people who have met him, apart from some of our states members. And I'm told that he had a recent meeting with them and produced streams of figures which proved how well they were doing on the Alderney routes. Well, I find that extremely difficult, and even some of our brighter states members maybe can be confused by statistics, damn lies, and statistics. Um, so I don't know. He's been very unlucky, hasn't he?
Well, has
Some
he? I mean,
well,
I don't think he has.
the thing
I
is,
think he's been,
you make your own luck.
yeah,
He has been singularly unfortunate with his aircraft,
over ambitious.
his rusty jet, which he inherited, in fairness.
Mm,
Um, I was looking through a report done a few years ago into Aurigny, where the jet was the shining star, and these were
that's right. The
somebody that
status
was
symbol.
looking at it. But
Yeah.
that's all gone horribly wrong on them, I believe. Um, Also, concerns raised about some of these, I don't know what you would call them, subcontractors they're using for wet leases,
Yes.
who
Yes.
also seem to have been extremely unlucky with their aircraft, and reports going to the AAIB. Um, I don't believe it's for Aurigny to regulate these carriers who all have AOCs undoubtedly. It's for the AAIB and the CAA to do that. But you have to say that they do seem to have picked some, and there's probably a limited range of people with the right aircraft
Yeah.
to call upon for wet leases. They seem to have had some rather unfortunate ones.
I mean, I was reading, Neil, that one of them, I think it was last week, in fog, got down to 58 feet above the runway and then had to go
Yeah.
around and then head off to Southampton. That surely is a bit scary, isn't it?
That is, and I've followed the posts about that, and some people say, well, Trilander pilots used to regularly do that. Well, back in the 50s and 60s, when the industry was not so regulated, you got on an airplane, you were never quite sure whether you were going to reach your destination. Air travel has become so much more safe, and nobody gets on a plane expecting an incident or a crash or anything like
Mm,
that these days, and that is mainly because of improved regulation. Um, yeah, I mean, 50 odd feet above ground in zero visibility is frankly scary. Yes, of course, they will have had their GPS and God knows what to show them just where they are or where they think they are.
mm.
But at that sort of height,
Yeah.
if you're a few hundred yards off your flight path, you're level with the buildings, frankly.
Yeah. No
Um,
much margin for error at
I
all.
looked on the AIABIB website because it's fascinating some of the stories there. Obviously, there's nothing yet on their pages. There will be in due course because
Mm.
anything that's reported to them, once they've started to look at it, will be in the public domain. But yeah, I mean that is not a good look. And much though people want to get on the ground, they want to get on the right bit of the ground. Um, and I mean, I don't know what the decision height there. It's usually around 300 feet or maybe a little
Mm.
bit lower, but it's certainly rather more than the height that plane was allegedly at.
At the
Um,
time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Um, You know,
So going
the old saying is there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old bold
bold
pilots.
pilots. That's probably true. So, as a result of all of the things that have been happening with Aurigny over the last 6 months, something like that, the states of Guernsey are going to carry out an inquiry, a review on what's going on and what has been going on. But I see that they're finding it difficult to come up with somebody to chair it who's going to be independent.
Well, that's surely going to be the case because it needs to be somebody with some authority experience. Obviously, as they've rightly said, not somebody connected with the bailiwick. Um, my reading and only reading what's published is that they are still working on the terms of reference, and my concern has been that they're doing this review largely driven by the problems with the ATR fleet, and the cynics would say Guernsey getting a bit of what Alderney's had to put up with for a number of years. Um, but if they're doing such a review, then it would be crazy not to look at the whole of the Aurigny operation.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, building the new runway and then saying, oh, we can't afford to do the last 50 meters that would allow us to be, open to a different class of aircraft. So, if you find the right person to go to the expense, which of course we will be shouldering part of that burden
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
taxpayers. So we will be helping to pay for this report. But to do, 9/10 of it on the ATRs without looking at the Dornier operations, to my mind, is absolutely crazy. Now, I understand that Mr. Roffey's response to that is, well, there's a PSO, public service obligation in place for Alderney. That was arranged by Policy and Resources, so we won't want to touch anything to do with that. Well, that is utter red herring, I think. Years ago, and various times since then, Guernsey have said we must get away from silo thinking, that one committee does one thing and doesn't liaise with another committee, and the effect of then they can, counteract each other. Well, if this isn't a case of silo thinking, I don't know what is. Just because P&R produced the so-called public service obligation, which incidentally have not yet met anybody outside the states who has a clue what's in it, even though the title is public.
Yes.
You try Googling public service agreement, and I wish you all the best because all you'll get is press reports saying there is one, with no indication as to what's in it. But that's by the by. The issue here is that obviously, if or when the appropriate person is found to do this review, I think they absolutely must look at all of the operations of Aurigny, and of course too, the information they produce would be quite useful and could be quite useful in determining the way forward with the Alderney routes.
Yeah.
The PSO, for what worth, expires next year anyway, which is why people are starting to say, we're on our own, or Guernsey will cut us loose, or we'll just be down to flights to Guernsey. So it's very important that the right decisions are made. And if the right person is produced to look into the ATR operation, they should also be looking at all of Orion's operation. And I would encourage your listener or viewer, whoever he or she is, or
It's Christine.
the many thousands, Tony, to write to Peter Roffey, as I have
Yeah.
done, and a few other people have done,
Yes.
and say,
Yeah.
no, you don't give us this nonsense about the PSO.
Yeah.
This review underway, it must include all
Yeah.
of Orion's operations.
Yeah. And it's an ideal opportunity, as you say, to look at the whole operation and see what can be done to improve it for the future. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, but I think it's a bit of a hot potato, of course,
I think it is, but
And they will
we like
talk
to be
about
topical.
mission creep, of course, a favorite expression. We can't have mission creep. Well, if you get your terms of reference right at the outset, you don't need that.
Based on changing the subject, based on the performance of the states recently with the energy policy, can we trust the states not to sabotage the proposals?
Well, my desk is wood, and I've got my fingers crossed. So it is difficult. I mean, obviously there is in any small community, particularly an island community, there is an inbuilt resistance to change. Ironically, I think a lot of that resistance to change, and no disrespect to second homers and holidaymakers who remember Alderney as it was in the 50s and the sunny days when they were deep in the sand building sandcastles, and want it to remain exactly as it was then. Unfortunately, that's just not an option. We're all getting older. We all need people to do everything for us, whether it be from gardening, plumbing, ultimately to care facilities.
Yeah.
And that requires younger, more energetic people. So we have to have those people, whether they're hopefully coming from local families who may have been here for a long time or for a shorter time, or people, young people coming in, looking for housing and what have you. So we have to be prepared to accept change. It's a fact of life. Um, the energy thing, yes. I mean, we've been wrestling with this for years and years and years. We have enormous potential energy tied up in the tides around the island. Um, People are again starting to talk about tidal energy. I'm not sure its time has yet come. It will do, but
Yeah.
you might be talking about tens of years. I don't know. Till
Yeah.
the price of every other sort of energy just becomes too exorbitant. That's when, I mean, that was what happened with North Sea oil. Obviously, it was technically impossible to extract North Sea oil, but when the cost of oil rose sufficiently, suddenly it became technically feasible to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anybody anywhere who has put together a sizable array of tidal turbines, which is the big challenge. There have been lots of individual ones and twos,
Mm.
which have proved concepts or otherwise. Pentland Firth in Northern Ireland again.
Bay of
Um,
Fundy in Canada.
well, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the biggest tidal rise in the world, and there again, of course, there are machines that go up and down with the tides. There are machines like the turbines with blades, external or internal blades. So there's a whole mass of different technology being developed. But I just think it may. We all got terribly excited when I joined the States in 2013, 14. Got terribly excited. It appeared to be just around the corner.
Yeah.
The corner was a lot further away than we thought. But
It's
then
a long
that is
corner.
world energy issues.
Yeah.
We're just a pimple in that respect, and
But
until the
we're
rest of the world decides
yeah.
on these technologies,
But
we
we're
can't.
looking for security rather than decarbonisation, I think, aren't we? We're looking at trying to cut down the amount of diesel that we use because of the fact that
Yes,
diesel is difficult to obtain and it's very market driven. Um, the fact of the matter is, Neil, that most of us depend on kerosene heating.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
you're never going to sort of decarbonize as long as you have that in the
Well,
fact as a factor.
never's quite a long time. But I take your point. I mean, the world is clearly becoming a rather more dangerous place than maybe it was 20, 30 years ago. So to secure your energy, to be able to secure energy, even potentially at a higher cost,
Yeah.
is something that has to be a serious consideration. Um, I mean, the UK, with much more muscle than we have, obviously is still struggling with it themselves with heat pumps for houses. Do they
Mm.
work? Are they effective? Um, and in this post-factual world, it's so difficult to separate the truth from the fiction. So I do have some sympathy for those making difficult decisions, but to a degree, we have to try and plow our own furrow. And if we could become self-sufficient in energy, tick a box on the environmental issues, even if it costs us a bit more, then that's something that is probably worthwhile. So good luck to those who are pursuing it.
Right, I'm going to skip down the list a little bit and say about the Guernsey Hospital and the £30 million overspend that was concealed by civil servants. What's happening there? Gosh.
Concealed by civil servants, Tony. No, that's not their take on it. But my reading of the published stuff is they didn't really know. But between civil servants who didn't really know they should report an overrun and politicians who never thought to ask how we're doing against budget, as would appear to be the case, it doesn't give you a great deal of confidence in Guernsey's high-flying ability to manage their own affairs.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean it's dreadful, isn't it, really? I mean, I came from a banking background, and although I did lots of mainstream banking, I did projects as well. And the two critical factors always were, are we on budget, and are we on the timescales?
Yes.
Those are the two
And,
most
and does
important
everyone
questions in
know?
any
Does
project.
everyone know? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It's obvious,
how
isn't
can
it?
I mean, again, no disrespect to the president of the appropriate committee in Guernsey, but well, I think there's a bit of egg on faces all around there,
I,
but
I
then I'm
certainly
not
think
sure he
there is.
wanted the job. I think he rather think he got pushed into the job because nobody wanted that one. It's a bed of nails, is health and social security.
Very much so.
But yeah, no, it's so embarrassing to have a an overrun of that Greek, which, funnily enough, of course, would have paid for our all singing, all dancing Rome,
Well,
or
that's right. This
at
is
least 7/8
immediately
of
I
it.
saw that. I thought, yeah, there's the
would
airport.
have would have got halfway there with the runway, if not. But
But
no,
there you go. Uh,
that's very embarrassing. I mean, I have to say, I think Guernsey is going through all sorts of infrastructural problems, and some of these are pretty deep seated
mm.
with the MSG and health services generally. It's proven a very rather a torrid time for them, and it's difficult to see any salvation in the immediate future. They're getting
We've
harder and
only
harder.
got a couple of minutes left. And what I was going to say is, how can any authority, any government, plan on expenditure when they don't know how much
How much they're
income they're going to
taking?
get? Absolutely. And I'm looking at Guernsey income tax returns 2020, 85% completed, 2021, 66% completed, 2022, 44% completed. You can't
It's
budget on that basis, can you?
it's not wonderful, is it? One of my friends recently proposed that we should have a taxation strike to show our disapproval of the way they're managing Alderney. I said, well, I think you might be wasting your time because it'll probably be several years before they find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, well, no, you're absolutely right, Tony. I mean, we all do our tax returns, and I'm slightly adrift as to where I'm up to with them now because they sort of disappear. I've used the electronic system because it's just easier to sit at home and
Yeah,
do them on
yeah,
a rainy day,
yeah.
which we've had plenty.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Bit of fun, isn't it?
it's
Gaming.
obviously a rainy day job, isn't it? And then it sort of disappears into the black hole of Guernsey's income tax department and never to be seen again.
Oh
So,
dear.
oh, it's as I say, it's when I come back to the basic infrastructural problems that are some of them are really catching up
Yeah,
with Guernsey,
yeah.
and we're towed along in its wake in a sense. It's not really terribly satisfactory. There is nobody wants to see people fired or hardened
No.
unnecessarily. There is there is a reluctance to accept accountability, which I say coming from the private sector is quite sort of difficult for me to get my head round how people can progress, never mind retain their jobs, but actually progress through their jobs and their career structure, showing no signs of competence whatsoever. And
We've run
well,
out of time. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. I've really enjoyed it as ever. And we'll do another one in a few months' time because I always think your updates on these things very useful. So can I thank you very much?
thank you, Tony. Please don't rush to do a new agenda next time. I'll just use the old one. We won't cross anything off it. Thank you for
Take
your
care.
time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye for now.